Alrighty, so the event is now live on YouTube. Again, we'll start at midday, but it's already running live, and we'll have an embed of it in the Artsfront website as well.
Okay, the embed should be there.
Okay, I'll just check it and make sure it's running.
Frankie here.
Site's loading a bit slow for me today. That's right, here we are. Cool. I can see that we are live on YouTube and Artsfront. That's good. Great. So now that I know we're live on both, I'm going to mute myself and disappear into the background. But you guys are, free to start on midday. What is it in Central Time?
11:30.
11:30. Yeah, you guys are half an hour behind.
And what are you, Alana?
I'm in. Oh, sorry. Where are you, Alana?
WA.
Oh, so you're 2 hours behind.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm from Brisbane, and so, but the place I work for is in Canberra. So I spend most of the daylight savings period, trying to work out what time zone everybody's in, because there's 5 of them by that point. Alrighty, I'm going to mute now. Have fun, get started at midday, and we'll see you on the other side.
Great.
Thanks.
Hey, Frankie, we've added you to the page now too. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Eddie, will you do a little introduction, or do you want me to?
No, it's probably better if you do, and I think we should probably start without Lily if we need to.
Okay. So in 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Yep. He said he's coming.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. I'm not worried.
Oh, MJ.
Hey, Susan.
Hey all, how you going?
Susan's our Auslan interpreter for
Good,
today.
thank you, Susan. Yourself?
Good, thanks. Good. Did you want me to put Auslan Stage Left or interpreter, or do you want me to put Susan Emerson in brackets interpreter?
Up to you, Susan. Put your name.
Yeah.
Whatever you like. Definitely good to have your name, but however else you want to list it is fine.
I'm just thinking for deaf people who want to pin me. That's all.
Great,
Nice
thanks.
to know who you are.
I'm about to put a comment in the chat encouraging them to pin you as well, so thank you for that.
Okay, so it's midday in the east of Australia, 10 a.m. in WA, and 11:30 where Frankie is in Central Australia. My name's Alana Hunt. I'm the communications coordinator for Regional Arts Australia. I'm also an independent artist and writer. I identify as female, and I've got fair skin, long dark hair, a black shirt on, and I'm sitting in front of a crowded bookshelf. So I'll be speaking today with Frankie Snowden and Luli Ashragi about our experiences as independent artists working outside of metropolitan centres during COVID-19. We're going to begin with a brief introduction of who we all are and where we're speaking to you from. So Regional Arts Australia acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander owners of country throughout Australia. And more specifically, I live in the town of Kununurra, which lies on Mirrawong country. Kununurra is an English bastardization of the original Mirrawong word Gununurrung, which means river or big water. And so, although it's obvious, I just wanted to make a small point of mentioning that colonization not only changes the sound of the word, but also like pulls out the meaning, removes the meaning from it, empties it. So it's these kind of continuing violences of colonization, also the absurdity and fragility of modern nation states that are the focus of a lot of my work within Australia and also South Asia. So I'll hand over to Frankie now for a brief introduction.
Whoa, Alana, that was so good. So in depth. Yeah, my name is Frankie Snowden, and I am a female identifying dance artist who is based in Central Australia in Alice Springs, which is on Aranda country. It's one of three, Alice Springs is comprised of 3 Aranda areas, and the one that we spend the most time on is Mbantua. I pay my deep respects to the Aboriginal elders past, present, and the young people emerging through the ranks for guiding me through my life. I was born here and grew up here, which makes me a Yipirinya baby of sorts. Yipirinya is the hawk moth caterpillar, and the ranges that surround Mbantua, Andulia and Ilpama, they comprise the caterpillar dreaming or the Yipirinya dreaming. So we sit nestled in a kind of valley of 900 million year old mountain ranges, and it's really amazing. I have short, dark, curly hair and multiple piercings in my face and ears and a very long neck. And I'm sitting in my bedroom in front of an extensive array of clothes and costumes that I have collected over the years. In my practice, I work primarily with independent dance artists to realize work that is both or is all things, including performance and touring, dance education for people of all ages, abilities and levels of connection to dance, and also have a really strong belief in and drive to diversify our understanding of research and practice in dance, and how we can spend more time practicing and perhaps not so much time trying to produce product-based work that requires short time frames and less thinking. It's hard to encapsulate everything into one little bit, but maybe I'll just stop there for now.
No, that's great, Frankie. Thank you. And Leoli, can we get a brief introduction from you and where you're speaking to us from?
Hi, Talafalava. My name is Leoli Shragi. I'm a Samoan, Persian, Chinese, European artist, curator, researcher, currently in Nhulunbuy in Yolngu country, and I've been here for 2 months. And before that, was living in Garamalang, Darwin, and also Tiohtià:ke, Mooniyang, Montreal. And with COVID, I find myself here for an extended period of time. My partner works here locally. And so in my practice, I'm really focusing on Indigenous languages. And those are languages from here, from the Great Ocean, the archipelagos, the Samoan archipelago, and languages across Turtle Island, North America, particularly in my curatorial work and my writing work, and how it enters into my visual arts practice as well. And part of that is to also think about sensual languages, not just spoken or visual languages, and the kinds of ceremonial political practices that have been erased or suppressed by Christianity, by settler colonialism, extractive militarism kind of complexes in the region. And yeah, so I kind of like jump between different hats, and I'm really glad to be living up here at the moment, and spent some time at Pukulangi Mulka yesterday, and it's really just floored by the incredible breadth of practice and infrastructure that exists here that I don't think any Indigenous community has globally. So it's very, very special to be here.
Wonderful. So I might just begin with a little brief overview of some of my experiences over the past month or so, and then move through Frankie and Luli, and then we will be open for questions. So as I was thinking about it, it came to mind that my experiences of COVID-19 here felt like a rising flood water that felt really life-threatening, particularly being in a remote area with a big Indigenous population whose health is and whose health conditions are poor precisely because of colonisation, and also the lack of health infrastructure here. It felt very worrisome for a period. I think that a lot of people can relate to that where it is, but it feels like the floodwaters have fallen down now and left us with a bit of a different landscape to think about and to work in now. I also feel that COVID really affected my ability to control my own time. And that was because I suddenly had my son and my stepson home from school. So their school time was really my really structured work time in the studio where I was working across many different projects. That was all very quickly taken away, and I had to reconfigure that. And then also the kind of pressures of caring for extended family. So my partner and extended family are Mirrawong, so we moved a lot of our family quickly to our bush block out of town. But our bush block was actually on the NT side of the border, which quite quickly the borders were blocked. So we had a lot of pressure just getting food supplies, maintaining communications in an environment where there's no phone or internet reception at all. And yeah, getting school material to kids out there, and all of those things created a really kind of complex situation for a few weeks that seems to be finding a little bit of a balance right now. Within my own practice, I'm quite used to working in my studio remotely with people around Australia and overseas. So that switch for me to kind of a digital realm wasn't very new. It wasn't a big change to how I was working. And I also feel for my practice, like I do exhibit in galleries, but galleries are not the prime space that my work moves. So I also feel a little bit lucky that because my practice was already dispersed in different ways, it wasn't dependent on one kind of platform. It hasn't suffered the loss that I know a lot of my peers have. I've also been really appreciative of some of the online platforms that have emerged. And one is Frankie's own Dance Classes with Guts. I've been able to listen in on public symposiums with ACCA in Melbourne, FICA in New Delhi, and also New York-based Polis project that I do some work with. But that's all been enabled because I have a computer and internet. And I know that that digital divide is really strong, not just globally, but specifically around the area that I live in as well. So while I am very kind of conscious and struggling of the state of the world and of the arts in a kind of quite devastating picture, I'm also hopeful that a lot of the existing inequities that have come about, that have been made more visible due to COVID, are things that we can start addressing across society, but also within the arts. And that gives me kind of a sense of hope. But I'm also conscious that I don't think that's going to take place without a bit of struggle, without, being very conscious of trying to make that materialize. So, Frankie, do you want to share some reflections? I know that your practice is really, it is really physically grounded, which is quite different to mine. So you've had a really different experience of that personally within your own work. And I'm also wondering how you think the restrictions and COVID have impacted the cultural landscape and community where you live.
Sure. Yeah. So as a dance practitioner, my my entire artistic existence really depends on being in rooms with other people and moving bodies together and having people watch that in quite small spaces. And so almost every single facet of the way that we operate as a dance community and dance makers has been challenged. I was on a big regional Australian tour from mid-early Feb until like about 3 days before everything went crazy. And we felt like we were being kind of chased by COVID around the country, and felt very lucky that we were in regional spaces and not in cities, because we were conscious of what was happening, but we were checking in every day and really aware that we were in much safer communities in terms of population size and exposure to the virus. But then I landed back in the Northern Territory about 2 weeks before we shut our borders. And very quickly it became very clear that it was going to be a situation in which, if we didn't act quickly with the fragility of our population here, we could be in a very, very terrible position. And I think because the Northern Territory acted quite swiftly, what was quite a scary thing has kind of subsided relatively quickly. We are I feel like we're in kind of safety bubbles a little bit where we live. Like, I can't get 20 kilometers out of Alice Springs without a biosecurity pass. So there is no choice but to be here and be connected to being here. And whilst that was quite strange at first, especially after having been on tour and like moving so much, I think once we came to terms with the fact that we were grounded and that things weren't likely to shift for us in terms of movement or capacity to be together in a studio, we kind of, a really deep sense of calm entered into the way that I was thinking about how to survive through this time in terms of practice. I'm very lucky that GUTS, which is the organization that I run, we've set it up in a way that allows myself and my co-director to access JobKeeper. So financially, I've been supported, and that's been really fantastic. But I had 10 months of work, like touring, making new shows, bringing artists into the Northern Territory, working with 250 young people, putting together a festival for the first time in Alice Springs, and it's all gone. And it actually can't be replaced. It just has to be held for another time. And also, I think, apart from the classes that I've been running, Alana, that you've been attending, which has been a really interesting thing, because it's been great to connect with people from elsewhere. Because we live remotely, we practice on our own a lot. And all of a sudden I'm dancing with people from all over the country that I wouldn't normally connect with on a weekly basis, which has been quite lovely. But there is a deep strangeness about dancing via a camera to other people somewhere else. And from the first class that we did, we were really, really aware that for us, dancing doesn't exist most potently in a digital medium. And so we haven't put much effort into going digital because we need to be connected to people in a way that only dance in a live spectrum allows. So we decided to wait. We've decided to wait until we've figured out ways to work with each other that are safe, but that are real, because our work won't translate, and we don't have the skills or the capacity to all of a sudden move all of our attention to be digital thinkers, as well as maintaining a creative practice that is substantial and meaningful to us. So it's been a really interesting time, but I think what has come to the fore mostly is that, I mean, we've thought for a long time about trying to move away from these pressures within our industries that require small amounts of financial and time investment to create works which are supposed to affect people deeply and be seen on stages all over the world in such a short amount of time, that it's almost impossible to think really deeply and to connect with concept and to research rigorously And if you're not ready to act and make in that kind of very product driven environment, then you kind of get forgotten about and left behind. And especially if you're in a regional space. But because no one can really do much at the moment, we've decided to really push that agenda of rethinking collaboration and research and investment in time. And so some of the things that we've built have been looking at new ways of collaborating remotely with other people, that in which a first development doesn't require a studio. So we're investing much more into our research and rigor of concept, so that the work that and planning on developing works for the next 4 years, rather than trying to get one off the bat and just get it out there.
We'll have to Leoli in a second, Frankie.
Sorry, yeah, I just think that people have been much more receptive to that conversation than they could have previously been, because all of a sudden everybody understands that that might be a better way of working. And we've tried to speak about it before, and it kind of falls a little bit on deaf ears, I think, unless you're speaking to like-minded practitioners. But I think now we might have a chance to really look at how we use our time and investment in terms of that.
That's wonderful. So Leoli, as a person, and your practice as well, has moved across lots of different spaces, sometimes in major cities and other times not. And now you've found yourself up in Nhulunbuy under lockdown. So can you give us some reflections on that? And also you mentioned that you've been engaging with some museum collections online. If you feel like speaking about that also.
Yeah, thank you. It's really nice to connect with everyone here. I think I just wanted to kind of firstly bring up like grief, and to think about the amount of, like, I had so many projects from like late March till October across Canada and here across Australia that I was like really looking forward to, that may never be really realized in the same way. Some of them have been postponed to the year after. But I think that, I'm sure we all went through just kind of feeling really debilitated the first few weeks of lockdown, and moving through different stages of poor mental health to thinking about internet access. And so there was like a 9-hour outage from about 11 p.m. until about 2 hours ago. So I wasn't sure if I was going to make this call even. And so to really, I think I find that I'm much more aware of where the fiber optic cables, the undersea cables, are connecting us, and how I'm wondering how much it might cost to have a satellite phone versus using my Telstra supposed 4G. And and I think it's also because I have been working digitally for a very long time, but always looking forward to these in-person gatherings. And so to kind of have gone past 2 months of mainly interacting with my partner and the birds that flock here at evening, but usually always in the screen, it's kind of dawned on me that this kind of treatment of being in between is the same as the bar cloths made by my ancestors in the Samoan archipelago, and that the overwhelming majority of which live in colonial collections. So I've spent a few weeks looking at thousands and thousands of bark cloth and trying to measure whether we have songs that mark the 1918 pandemic, that talk about the AIDS pandemic, that talk about the first smallpox pandemic, and kind of trying to think about a deeper Indigenous time frame, looking at, that we are survivors of multiple waves of sicknesses and mass death events, and then what that kind of means in terms of like, do I even want to make art anymore? And I was pretty happy for quite a while with the work that I produced for the Sydney Biennale, which hopefully will be able to be seen by some people in person again soon. And that was really 2 years worth of research, production, working with a lot of partners across Australia and Canada, and a lot of cultural consultation with senior Samoan artists. And that for me, I was like, for quite a while, I was like, that's enough. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm at home. Time to write some poems, so I've been actually making a new work that will be premiered tomorrow with Monash University Museum of Art. It's a series of digital drawings and voice recorded poems set in 2025. So from the recent future, looking back at now, looking back at previous pandemic periods, and imagining, if things can shift so swiftly, in a matter of weeks on a global scale, we don't have to go down the lazy path of dystopian futurisms. We can have very different kinds of futures that are hopeful, that are generative. And so I think I think it's somehow a blessing and a curse of being in the arts, that we think about culture in deeper time, in shorter periods of time, but ultimately we need hope to survive. And so that's been really important to me. And I also wanted to say about joining Nuholani's dance classes to learn Ori Tahiti and Hula Hawaii on Friday mornings when the internet connection permits. Last week it didn't. And that's something that I did when I lived in Melbourne a few years ago. And so it's been really important to kind of be able to move. And I was like, I haven't danced for months, because I just haven't gotten into the, like, Next Wave have a whole program this coming Saturday. And I think it becomes easier, as we both said, to connect with the DJ sets and live dance performances coming in from New York, from LA, from Honolulu, wherever. But it's still through a screen. So I think when you have a closer existing relationship, it becomes easier to move that body again, realize that the hips know how to do something. Yeah, it's been hard, but I think it's definitely a time where I'm pivoting. So I'm supposed to be. Yesterday, I was supposed to return to my postdoctoral fellowship at Concordia University in Montreal. Doesn't look like that's happening this year. So I'll be joining my partner living in Mbandwa in a few months' time, so I can come to Frankie's class in person. And I think that kind of, that living out here and not living in Melbourne or Sydney has provided, but being able to orbit those places has enabled me a much more enriched relationship to this land. And of course, there are different countries that I'm moving through, but it's rekindled a different kind of relationship to Australia as a whole.
Great. I could keep speaking to you both about so many things you've said, but I think it's time we move to questions. We've got 7 minutes left. Eddie, are there any questions that have come through?
Yeah, we've got a couple of good ones. Sarah Norm from Feral Arts had a beautiful one right at the start, which is, do you think that COVID has shone a light on the regions? They said it feels like there's a lot of online content coming from the region at the moment. We had a meeting. I facilitated a meeting for APAM a couple of weeks ago, and had this realization mid-meeting, which I bang on about a lot. I mean, I grew up in Alice Springs, Mbandwa, went to Melbourne for 10 years, came back after never thinking I would. And now I can't imagine living back in a city or being an urban practitioner really again. But I really felt like and feel like maybe regional arts can have a moment where we rise to the fore of models of practice, because so much of what we make is first embedded in our communities. And even if it's designed to tour or to go elsewhere, it's been first developed in communities that have a different way of investing and being with people's work. And I think with mobility being going to be something that is really difficult, we're going to have to be looking at models of practice and engagement and art making that is not about a touring model necessarily, or that art from somewhere else that is not our home is more interesting for whatever reason. And so I really feel like if we can encourage all practitioners to be connecting with their regional sectors, they might learn things about how they will survive within their communities in places that don't necessarily think about the work that they're making or who is viewing it in the same way as the regions do. Great thoughts, Frankie. Thank you. Laoli or Alana, do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I just back that up. I think our relationship to place where we are, can't speak for every artist practicing outside of a city, but I think the place that you're in intuitively is a big part of how you work. And I think now that we're all grounded and we need to think about our movement around the world generally, like really bringing that to the fore is something that regional artists and organizations can kind of lead in, definitely.
Yeah, I just also wanted to say that I think the feeling of isolation of being in regions and not in being in, you know, the two cities that majority of the discourse and touring and things happen between in Australia. I think now that we're all experiencing isolation and living in our houses, it provides a very different spectre and possibility for engagement and connection across vastly different geographies and, you know, class boundaries, gender, sexuality, culture, etc. I think another thing that has struck me recently is realizing that in the Northern Territory or in other regional parts of Australia, we are going to be able to meet far sooner than folks in bigger cities, and how we meet, and, you know, like kind of making sure that elders and anyone who's immunocompromised still has a place. And I kind of, there's a lot of, you know, strange eugenicist kind of discourse coming forward, and I think it's really important to resist that and not go down that dystopian path. But yeah, I'm very grateful for the opportunities to connect with folks like right now, and I feel that I think it's also a gift of time if you have the financial capacity to. Like, all my income evaporated, and just doing my best, and, you know, going to write a few books or something like that. So I think how we spend the time and what kind of contribution you want to make, all of these kinds of much deeper soul searching kind of moments, it's precisely the time we need to rethink the entire culture of Australia, because it's well and truly broken well before this funding round from the Australian Council. You know, everything, we're not anywhere near where we could be as a society, and engaging in much smaller location, you know, centered communities, I think is the way forward. And I was thinking about if I would spend 2 weeks on a boat to go and to travel or, you know, a month to go to the next Venice Biennale, which just got announced to be in 2022. I was like, yeah, I could do that, 2 weeks at sea, or, you know, why not? I think, you know, just thinking about travel more as a pilgrimage and as a journey as well, rather than just the in between A and B.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Alana, I think we're pretty much almost at time. Do you guys have any closing thoughts you want to leave with the viewers?
I just want to add that I'm really passionate about how kind of the local can be shared globally as well, and that the local can have information that can relate to other localities, like that there's a share. I think that being grounded within where you are is important, but also having the capacity to learn from where other people are grounded, and that exchange. And I think this moment hopefully will open that kind of thing up more.
Yeah, I think also I haven't done a bunch of touring in my career, but the most recent touring I did was all to regional centres, and the just the types of audiences and the questions and the engagement with work from other regional spaces in those spaces was like quite fascinating and amazing compared to performing work in capital cities in major festivals and things. When, yeah, I don't know, it's a very important thing to remember, that like the exchange between regions as well, as like from regional to urban, or, you know, whatever, is also going to create a really rich discourse and a pride in our regional spaces that I think is really useful and important to move forward with. And so I look forward to connecting with those communities when I can again too, and very much looking forward to seeing you, Leoli, back here, and Alana soon, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. We were talking last week, Alana and I, about potentially coming through and visiting on the NT side, or skipping over to Kununurra on the way down to Mbandwa, so might be happening.
Oh.
And thanks to everyone for joining in and listening. I'm sorry we didn't have more time for questions.
Thanks, everybody.